Welcome, and thank you for joining this webinar presenting the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the National Endowment for the Humanities Research and Development Grant Program. My name is Joshua Sternfeld. I am a Senior Program Officer and Program Coordinator for Research and Development. I should say at the outset that at times I will be referring to the program as R&D and the Notice of Funding Opportunity as NOFO for short. I will begin this webinar by discussing the programmatic objectives for research and development, including the two funding levels that we offer and the conditions for applicant eligibility. Next, I will cover briefly the components of the application, followed by a few examples of awards that we have funded in recent years at both levels of funding. I will conclude this presentation by outlining the application review process, some tips for preparing and submitting your application, and finally, other resources for learning more about this program. Research and Development is a grant program that is administered by NEH's Division of Preservation and Access, which is one of the 7 divisions and offices that administers grant programs. R&D supports projects that address major challenges in preserving or providing access to humanities collections and resources. This point is important to emphasize. While research and development in the humanities can encompass a range of activities and disciplines, the focus of this program must be on work related to humanities collections and resources. We consider this condition broad in terms of the types of collections and materials that are the subject of your project, including, but not limited to, audiovisual and time-based media, born digital assets, archaeological artifacts, manuscripts, rare books, artworks, archival records, and an assortment of other materials. The objective of research and development is to support the critical work for developing standards, tools, software, workflows, equipment specifications, metadata schema, datasets, or other products that contribute to improving the preservation of and access to humanities collections. The two levels of funding, what we call Tier 1 and Tier 2, are designed to capture as broadly as possible the range of activities undertaken in an R&D project. Tier 1 projects may request funding for a period of performance of up to 2 years and $75,000 in outright funds. Tier 1 may support early planning for an advanced implementation project. This level can also support other activities, such as basic research, case studies, and discrete experiments, many of which may not endeavor to expand into a larger scale project. Tier 2 projects are for a period of performance of up to 3 years and up to $350,000. Projects in this category should focus on the development of standards, practices, methodologies, and workflows designed to advance the field. We have a submission deadline of May 18, 2021 for all applications. Any U.S. nonprofit organization with 501c3 tax-exempt status, accredited public and 501c3 institutions of higher education, state and local governmental agencies, and federally recognized Native American tribal governments are all eligible to apply for research and development. Individuals, along with foreign or for-profit entities, are not eligible to apply. There are a couple of issues that applicants ask us frequently. First, we caution our applicants to avoid including overlapping project costs if you are applying for or have already received 2 or more federal grants. Secondly, we want to encourage eligible U.S. institutions to collaborate internationally. However, it is important to understand that NEH funds may not be used to make subawards to foreign organizations. You may obtain the services of foreign individuals or consultants to carry out programmatic activities on a fee-for-service basis. The R&D Notice of Funding Opportunity highlights 4 areas of special interest. These areas of interest are only intended as a guide for potential applicants, and in no way are intended to privilege certain types of projects over others. If you have a project that does not seem to fit one of these areas, you should still apply. As I will discuss later in this webinar, our review process strives to offer a fair and objective review for every application. I think you will find that the areas that we have included in this year's NOFO are intentionally broad in scope. The first two areas are long-standing interests of our agency. We continue to encourage projects that support work to advance the preservation and access of audiovisual, time-based, and digital materials, from the earliest recording formats to the most recent born digital assets. We also continue to have a vested interest in advancing work in conservation science, which we see as fundamental to supporting the essential work of preserving our material heritage. The third category covers the significant work involved with preserving cultural heritage materials that may be imperiled due to armed conflict, war, looting, natural disasters, economic development, poor management, and tourism. This special interest appears in several of our grant programs, and you will find a link to more information about it in our posted NOFO for R&D. I would like to pause a moment on the fourth and final area of special interest. At NEH, we value contributions from underrepresented communities. For R&D, we encourage projects that pursue work in making preservation and access activities more accessible, sustainable, and manageable for institutions with limited capacities. We understand that achieving the gold standard for preservation may be unrealizable for many types of institutions, such as minority-serving institutions, tribal colleges and universities, community colleges, and smaller heritage institutions, such as public libraries, historical societies, archives, or museums. R&D projects, in other words, can investigate methods for making the work of preserving humanities collections more accessible, sustainable, and manageable for institutions with limited capacities. Over the years, R&D has supported fantastic projects that have tackled issues of preservation and access for persons with disabilities and indigenous communities, to name just two examples. I would now like to take a moment to familiarize you with the components of the application. The core of your R&D application is the main narrative, which should include 6 sections as outlined in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. It may be useful to think about your application structured along 2 axes, one that discusses the significance of your project to the work of the humanities and preservation, and the other that covers the technical and logistical elements of your project, such as personnel, methodology, and work plan. The most successful applications are those that can demonstrate how both axes complement one another toward constructing a project that is appropriate in its scope and objectives. The discussion of the significance of your project is broken into the first 3 sections of the narrative. For the significance to the humanities section, you will want to focus on how your R&D work would benefit the work of the humanities, such as research, educational programming, and/or public programming. You will want to address the overall research problem or challenge that your project will address, while also focusing on the types of collections under consideration. The second section, Preservation and Access Research Impact, should focus on how your project outcomes would benefit preservation practitioners, such as the conservators, archivists, librarians, curators, or other heritage professionals who may gain most directly from the data, methodologies, workflows, tools, or other products developed under your project. The second half of your main narrative will discuss the details of your project execution. You should discuss the methodologies that you anticipate using in conducting your experimental research, software development, data capture, and collections handling. For the work plan, we ask that you provide 2 versions, one in the narrative and a separate required plan as an appendix. For the narrative, your work plan may outline the overall activities and schedule, whereas the work plan in the appendices should include a more detailed account. In drafting your plan, don't forget also to indicate the roles and responsibilities of each project team member, including those that may be hired during the project. Project sustainability and evaluation are critical areas to cover in your application, and may be expressed differently depending on the context of your proposal. In some instances, you may want to cover how you propose to make your research data accessible, otherwise known as a data management plan. If your project is one of several phases of work, you may want to outline subsequent stages, either in the main narrative or as an optional supplemental appendix. This may also be an opportunity to discuss your plans to secure outside support or community participation as needed. The following are the major components you'll need to assemble for your application. A full listing of all materials appears in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Some of the materials are standard forms, but for many of them, you will prepare a document and save it as a PDF for uploading into grants.gov. Please follow formatting requirements and naming conventions carefully. Most of these items are self-explanatory, but I would like to point out a few things. Our agency has shifted to using a standard budget form called the Research and Related Budget Form. A separate budget justification is required that offers requested information about certain budget items listed. You may also use the budget justification to include cost share. Please understand that cost sharing is voluntary and may be used in instances where the total costs exceed the amount awarded by NEH. Cost sharing will not be considered in the evaluation of applications. You will find detailed information in our NOFO explaining how to complete the budget form, but should you have additional questions about the budget, we encourage you to reach out to our colleagues in our Office of Grants Management who can assist you. As I mentioned earlier, you must supply a detailed work plan as a separate attachment. R&D projects are typically very complex, often containing overlapping activities and multiple responsibilities for project personnel. It is important that you explain succinctly how each activity informs subsequent work and how you will coordinate project partners or outside collaborators. Finally, you may provide supplemental materials that help illustrate the numerous components of your project. For those projects either collecting or working with large data sets, you may want to include a data management plan. A data management plan can indicate your commitment to project sustainability by outlining who, among your project team or institution, will be responsible for ensuring data or other products are properly stored, updated, and made accessible once your project is complete. Also, a dissemination plan, while not required, can outline in further detail your target audience and how you anticipate advancing your project results in the service of advancing standards, methodologies, or workflows. I would like to take a few moments to discuss the qualities of a successful application. Research and development is intentionally broad in scope. We see this program as one that contributes to the work of the field by advancing preservation and humanities activities that we see executed in our other grant programs. Therefore, we encourage you to submit proposals that may have a degree of risk or experimentation. If I were to select one quality that nearly all our successful awards possess, it would be interdisciplinarity. Of the dozens of grant programs offered by NEH, research and development is perhaps one of only a few that can support original scientific work. R&D awards have supported chemists, engineers, computer and information scientists, and a host of other types of scientists, practitioners, and scholars. It is truly an interdisciplinary program in the best sense of the term. As such, successful applications tend to have project teams that represent multiple disciplines or fields, which makes sense since, as we discussed earlier, applicants must demonstrate how their projects would benefit the work of the humanities, as well as the work of preservation practitioners. The best applications are often those written by multiple key personnel who represent different domain expertise. A few examples of recent R&D awards might help illuminate the breadth of the program, beginning with a Tier 1 project from Georgia Institute of Technology. Just to remind you, a Tier 1 project does not have to work toward a larger implementation project. You may also conduct discrete case studies that contribute to the field by sharing lab results, publishing findings, producing a prototype, among other possible outcomes. A team of researchers from the Georgia Institute of Technology with expertise in 3D and virtual reality modeling collaborated with the Center for Puppetry Arts in order to pilot an interactive system that provides access to a puppet's functionality and expression through game-like technology. The prototyping work delivered a standalone application that allows interaction with scanned puppets in a VR environment, such as what you see in the images here. The project team also delivered a test implementation of a possible web archive design that can serve as a proof of concept for implementing an online archive of 3D visualizations. Although the focus of this Tier 1 project was on exploring the material properties of historic puppets, the findings may be extensible for other heritage artifacts. One of the Tier 2 projects we are excited to share from our latest round of awards comes from Rochester Institute of Technology's Image Permanence Institute. For 2 decades, and with NEH support, IPI has conducted path-breaking work to research and educate the preservation field about sustainable environmental management strategies. Much of that work has focused on investigating preventive approaches to mitigating harmful effects to humanities collections caused by relative humidity and temperature. For instance, temporary shutdowns of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, fan speed adjustments, and outside air reduction can contribute to substantial energy cost savings without jeopardizing collections. IPI's current research and development project will investigate changes to pollutant levels caused by implementing these sustainable measures. Cognizant that each collection environment has its own unique conditions, IPI plans to analyze collected project data from 3 heritage institutions to inform the development of a data collection and modeling procedure for widespread use. As with its previous research projects, IPI will make results available through peer-reviewed journals, conferences such as the biannual Indoor Air Quality in Heritage and Historic Environments Conference, as well as a modified edition of its freely accessible guide, Methodology for Implementing Sustainable Energy Saving Strategies for Collections Environments. I would like to highlight the ongoing work by WGBH to develop a widely implemented metadata schema for audiovisual materials called PBCore. Among the many deliverables, the project team drafted metadata crosswalks for Dublin Core, MARC, and Premise, which were then presented at a user testing workshop for further refinement. Realizing that adoption of a standard such as PBCore requires considerable buy-in among preservation practitioners with varying levels of knowledge and expertise in AV preservation, WGBH tied schema development with the development of resources for PBCore users that included sample records, use cases, mappings, and a printable PDF handbook. The project also developed PBCore integration and plugins for a range of common systems, including ProTrack, Collective Access, Archive Space, and Omeka. Now that you have seen just a small sample of the types of projects funded by R&D, I would like to offer an overview of the application process. Applications for NEH grants, like many federal grants, are submitted through a web portal called grants.gov. If you are new to the system, I would recommend spending some time familiarizing yourself with it before you submit your application. Your institution, if it has not done so already, needs to register at least 1 month before applying. We strongly urge that you apply early, as it gets overwhelmed in the immediate run-up to the midnight deadline. Grants.gov support is available 24/7. All NEH grant applications go through a lengthy review process, which has several stages. Following the submission deadline, NEH staff review applications for eligibility according to the requirements outlined in the NOFO. All eligible applications undergo the full review process. R&D applications are sorted into panels with similar project objectives to help ensure a fair and objective review. The first review stage, and what we consider the foundation for our entire review process, is the peer review panel. Evaluators with expertise in the types of projects represented on the panel read the applications, write comments, and post a preliminary rating. Then they meet to discuss the applications, at which point they submit a final rating and any additional comments in support of their decision. You will note that the review criteria listed here adheres closely to the narrative sections, so it is in your interest to address each section in your proposal as thoroughly as you can. Following peer review, NEH staff recommends which applications should move forward. Those recommendations are considered by the National Council on the Humanities, 26 people nominated by the President and approved by the Senate. The Council makes recommendations to the endowment's chairperson, who takes all this into consideration and makes the decision on which applications to fund. As you might imagine, the life cycle of your application is quite a long process, but allows for rich review. After awards are announced, applicants can request the comments from their evaluators. If your proposal is not funded, the reviewer's comments can help you think about how to revise your proposal for next time. Now that you have a sense of the many steps of the review process, I would like to offer some general advice for preparing your application. The narrative is your opportunity to make the strongest possible case for your project. Don't assume that reviewers know anything about your institution or project beyond what you present in the narrative and application. While it may seem obvious, we cannot emphasize enough that the best narratives are those that adhere to the sections outlined in the NOFO and address all review criteria. Perhaps one of the most difficult challenges for R&D applicants is striking the right balance of technical or scientific language. Your application will be reviewed by a range of readers with varying backgrounds. Many reviewers may be your peers, and so it is important that you demonstrate your knowledge of the field and the most recent research or literature. Successful applications are those that can also explain the significance of your R&D work for a general educated audience, who may be more interested in how your work will have an impact on the work of the humanities. In some instances, if you find your discussion of, say, your project methodology is becoming overly weighed down by terminology, you may want to consider shifting some of your explanation to a strategically included optional supplemental appendix. Letters of support are optional, but they can be effective in affirming the impact that your project will have in the preservation field and the humanities. We tend to see the same errors from submitted applications. For R&D, often we receive projects that are overly focused on preserving a specific humanities collection at your institution. Such activities, when not tied to contributing to the broader knowledge of the preservation field, will typically not be competitive, and in some cases may be declared ineligible. We have several programs dedicated to preserving your institutional collections. We would hate for you to put a lot of work into preparing your application only to discover that your project would be better suited for another NEH program. If you have questions about whether R&D is the right program for your project, it is best to reach out to the Division of Preservation and Access and speak with a program officer. As I have mentioned before, always keep in mind that the humanities are central to what we do at NEH. It is the primary lens with which we review all grant proposals, even those that are scientifically based, as may be the case for an R&D project. Also, applicants often get into trouble when they don't plan. You want to make sure that you have enough time to study the guidelines, prepare the scope of your project, consult with partners, collaborators, and your administration, draft your application, and get feedback from colleagues. Evidence of an underprepared application tend to appear in missing letters of commitment from consultants and partners, a budget that does not adequately reflect the project activities, or an underdeveloped discussion of the significance of your project. Finally, you may have noticed that the images in this presentation were taken from Research and Development Awards. If you would like to learn more about any of these projects or all R&D awards, you may conduct a search for a specific award number, institution, or type of project in our funded query database using the web address that you see at the bottom of the screen. I realize that I've presented a lot of information in a compact format. You can find the NOFO, along with other useful information such as R&D FAQs and other sample successful application narratives, on our website, neh.gov. If there is nothing else that you take away from this presentation, it should be that program staff are always available to assist you with questions about preparing and submitting your application. And one final piece of advice that I recommend everyone consider. Program officers are available to read drafts of your narrative proposals submitted to our preservation email account, preservation@neh.gov, no later than April 13th, 2021. Even if your draft is not fully prepared, this can be a helpful and informative exercise. I hope this presentation has been useful in planning to apply to research and development. Thank you.